Retro FPS demo recommendations.
Once again, it's time to do another little demo roundup, as although the Retro FPS Twitter community does a great job of signal boosting within the app, it doesn't always translate into places like YouTube, where, to be honest, the main gaming audience kind of is. The 3 games I'm going to be running through in this video are all currently available to download either from Steam or itch.io, and I'll avoid spoiling too much of what lies within, so if anything here piques your interest, please check them out. Small devs like this really do need your support.
Perkele, siihen koske, saatana vie. Sinua tällä harjalla lyön perkeelti viekö, jos tuut tänne.
White Hell is what happens when you take My Summer Car, a mixed handful of retro shooters, throw them all in a blender, top that up with beer and tape down the pulse button. An incredibly to-the-point FPS by Robert Rowless and Mikko Tampa, White Hell's premise is simple enough. You awake in your bathroom after an all-night bender to discover that while you were unconscious in a pool of vomit, the world sort of, ended. Armed with a 6-shooter, some rad sunglasses, and what must be a raging hangover, you set out into the frozen post-apocalyptic Finnish wasteland to figure out what the fuck's going on, or at the very least to find more beer. Along the way, you'll lay your hands on a decent assortment of weaponry, go toe-to-toe with nefarious not Nazis and dirty not commies, and spend a lot of time kicking sausages into an irate street vendor's face. As you may be starting to suspect, much like My Summer Car, White Hell isn't taking itself all that seriously. Hearing someone bellow, "Oi satana!" or "Perkele!" before being pelted with potatoes, or regaining your health with a refreshing trip to the sauna is all part of the game's half celebration, half satire of Finnish culture. It's not just in the aesthetics either. A mechanic introduced in the last level is sisu, a Finnish term for determination, grit, spunk, that kind of thing, which powers a completely new selection of magical weapons. The demo lets you play with a couple of these, a sword, which boomerangs around the place like a lightsaber, bisecting anything it touches, and a pistol that launches exploding green ticks that stick to whatever they hit and blast them into chunks. The rest of your loadout so far, a revolver, shotgun, machine gun, and bolt-action rifle, are all serviceable if lacking the same kind of character of the aforementioned magical weapons, while the star of the show manages to be, of all things, your right foot. I've played plenty of games where you can employ a tactical boot, Dark Messiah, Duke Nukem, Succubus, ugh. But I think White Hell and, to be honest, Postal 2 are the only times I've been able to punt a rocket right back at the guy who fired it at me. Far more than a gimmick, judicious use of the boot can take out low-tier enemies with their own projectiles, becoming downright essential when facing down mini-boss types who spam rockets like it's the 5th of fucking November. It's also pretty handy for opening doors and flattening whatever poor dickhead was lurking on the other side. Getting into the content of the demo proper, the current build has 4 levels to run through, although I'd honestly say that it's from the second level, the Shores of Lake Tuoni, that the game really starts bringing everything it has to the table. The first level, Living Simple, is more of a tutorial, introducing you to the basics of movement and combat, but these drab, linear corridors and blocky outdoor areas didn't really fill me with confidence. From level 2 onwards, however, each level drastically changes things up. I won't spoil more than I absolutely have to, but Downtown Punks and Castle of the Blue Eagle started giving me some serious Dusk and Return to Castle Wolfenstein vibes respectively, which is about as high as my praise can really get as far as imitation goes. One last thing I would recommend, just to ensure you have the best time possible with this, if you have any experience in retro shooters like this, play on the hard setting, drunk. I started on Tipsy, the medium setting, and the difference between the two is worlds apart. I went from casually obliterating low-tier thugs to dodging and kicking like a chorus girl on amphetamines. Enemies come at you harder, faster, and in greater numbers, while your ammo and health supplies get throttled right back to the bare essentials. I actually may go back and try this on the hardest difficulty, Wasted, just to see if it maintains a reasonable difficulty curve or not, but as far as introductions go to this game, go drunk or go home. The link to White Hell's Steam page is in the description below. If anything you've seen or heard has caught your eye, you really have no excuse but to give it a go.
It's a fair cop.
Coven is a game about feminism, cancel culture, and female empowerment in a patriarchal society. It's also a game about hopping through the world like a jacked-up cruise missile, ridiculous amounts of gore, and the relentless consumption of glistening man flesh. Okay, without the shitposting, Coven is a straightforward retro shooter with a very simple premise. You are a woman with a righteous grudge to bear, having been burned at the stake for alleged witchcraft, which, come to think of it, may not be without good reason given the whole rose from your grave and started murdering people thing. Either way, there's a lot of shithill Puritan-looking motherfuckers out there who need their skulls caved in with an axe and their balls roasted on a hibachi, and you're just the girl for the job. With the wider premise of the game being multiple episodes set across different time periods, Episode 1 takes us to a windswept mountainside in the 17th century, packed full of religious zeal, dark secrets, and god-awful hats. Despite being limited to only one level, the demo covers a lot of ground, showcasing much of what Coven has to offer. First and foremost, despite being undead, you are not an unstoppable arse-kicking revenant. You're still just one person going up against dozens of well-armed arseholes, and attempting to bulldoze through them with just an axe is going to end very badly. Instead, Coven goes for a hybrid blend of stealth and all-out aggression, where picking off lone enemies with a hatchet to the back isn't just a viable strategy, it's optimal. Speaking of, going back to what I just said about manflesh, I really wasn't kidding. In Coven, though you can recover health with pickups scattered throughout the area, your most reliable means of regaining health is going to be hacking corpses into bits and feasting on their remains. Your melee weapons and pistols reliably leave most enemies intact, but as you begin to deploy the more devastating items in your arsenal, such as the shotgun, double-barrel shotgun, grenades, and the crossbow, whose alt-fire supercharges a bolt with eldritch energy, you're going to be left with nothing to nosh upon. It's a balance I actually quite enjoy, keeping certain weapons relevant into the late game without feeling overly forced. Of course, as of now, with this being an alpha, there's still plenty going on that's subject to change, though apart from the lack of music in the game itself, the only criticism I have thus far is how the melee weapons have a reach far beyond what the model would suggest. One last thing I will point out here and now, since everyone I've seen on YouTube playing this seems to have missed it, when you start the demo, turn around, go back here to the right, there's the double-barreled shotgun. It fucks. You're welcome. The Coven Alpha is on itch.io as a pay-what-you-want item, link in the description, go get it and munch on some nuts.
My mind, no problem, right?
Unit down.
Okay. So I saw a good amount of hype going around about Peripeteia a while back, billing itself as a kind of Polish Deus Ex, which, you know, that's a pretty lofty target to go for, but I'm not going to write anyone off based purely on their aspirations. Which is why it pains me to say that while I'm still interested in this game as a project, this is not the kind of demo that's going to sell people on it. Peripeteia is set in a futuristic political wasteland known as the International Disputed Zone, a place where death is cheap and you're in a seller's market. Cybernetic augmentation is commonplace, yet the aesthetics of the tech itself are firmly rooted in the chunky CRT and diode 90s. Playing as Marie, a cyberized super soldier, you spend your days in a dingy apartment, taking on contracts to eliminate gangsters, crooked politicians, and anyone else who's managed to make powerful enemies, while tending to your cactus like any contract killer should. Outfitted with a selection of augmentations, including night vision, super speed, and partial invisibility, you're free to pursue your target however you see fit. In theory. Unfortunately, this is where things start to fall apart. For a demo intended to introduce the player to the way the game plays, at least in theory, Peripeteia gives you absolutely no guidance as to how to do almost anything. Some things are intuitive enough, such as the light and sound bars at the bottom of the screen showing you how visible you are to nearby enemies, as well as the drag and drop inventory system, but far too much is left for the player to figure out. Case in point, reloading. If you don't explore your apartment before leaving, you're going to be starting the mission with a silenced Makarov with 10 rounds in the magazine. It's enough if you plan on ghosting the level, not quite so much if you're trying to get a handle on how the game should play to begin with. I managed to find some rounds in the bathroom, plop them into my inventory, and then set about the mission. Later on, having burned through my magazine, I hit R. Nothing. Okay, I guess I have to manually reload the magazine. I right-click the gun, and sure enough, I can unload the mag. I right-click the ammo. Nothing. I drag the ammo over the magazine. It just trades places. After a few minutes, I finally realised that to reload a magazine I have to drag the ammo over it in a very specific way, then it'll reload the magazine. This lack of clear direction is everywhere. You can climb ledges, but there's nowhere for you to spend any time getting familiar with how these mechanics work. Your objective for the mission in the demo is little more than kill this guy, he's in this tower, and what little guidance you get from NPCs in the level itself runs straight into a dead end. It was only through randomly exploring the storm drains below the city that I ran into a group of resistance fighters who offered me any kind of help at all if I whacked a bartender. I then got lost trying to find the way out and stumbled upon the very elevator that had let me use without having to do their dirty work. Don't get me wrong, there are some moments where Peripeteia shines. Its entire aesthetic does genuinely feel close to playing through Deus Ex for the first time, albeit with a disturbingly wonky paratropic vibe running beneath it. The world is grim, atmospheric, and occasionally darkly comic, such as finding a statue of Lenin that has had its head replaced with a TV and that you can pinch the original discarded concrete bonds if you fancy a souvenir. Actually making it close enough to my target to engage, scaling the outside of a skyscraper in the pouring rain, moving through the shadows while I avoid the attention of roving guards, it all feels great. It's just that for every 5-minute burst of cool gameplay, there are 20 minutes of confused plodding about trying to figure out what to do next. None of what I've criticised here isn't anything that the devs can't and probably won't get around to fixing, but as a showcase of what the game can offer, it's not won me over. The reason why I'm covering it here is that I'm still optimistic for what Peripeteia can become, but it needs to come a long way before it can meet the lofty target it's set for itself. You can find the Peripeteia demo on itch.io as a pay-for-you-want item. If you're curious about what this project could amount to, I'd still suggest you give it a look, but understand going in that you're going to be more than a little lost until you get a handle on things. And that's it. Hopefully you've seen something that's tickled your fancy. If so, you know where to find it, and you know how to follow the devs. Stay safe, and I'll catch you later. Goodbye.